Jake Morrison stood in the back of the crowded auction hall on Station 7, watching rich buyers fight over shiny starships he could never afford. His last 300 credits felt heavy in his pocket, and his stomach growled from skipping. Breakfast again? The smell of recycled air and machine oil filled the space as the auctioneer's voice echoed off metal walls. He had been a salvage operator for 8 years, making a living by buying broken ships and selling their parts. It was hard work but honest, and he was good at fixing things that others gave up on. Last month, the station authorities took his ship for unpaid docking fees. Now he needed anything that could fly and carry cargo. The expensive ships. Went fast? A sleek courier vessel sold for 50,000 credits. A military transport went for twice that. Jake watched and waited, knowing his chance would come with the junk nobody else wanted. These rich buyers did not care about ships that needed work. Hours passed before the auctioneer reached the bottom of the list. Jake's feet hurt from standing, but he stayed alert. Finally, they wheeled out Lot 47, a small craft that looked like nothing he had ever seen. Its hull was dark gray with strange curves instead of straight lines. No one in the crowd seemed to recognize what kind of ship it was. This vessel was found drifting in the outer system, the auctioneer announced. Origin unknown, all systems. Dead, sold as is with no warranty. Do I hear 100 credits? The hall stayed quiet. Jake looked around and saw other bidders shaking their heads. The ship was maybe 30 meters long and looked intact, but its weird shape made people nervous. In the salvage business, unknown meant risky. 50 credits? The auctioneer tried again. Still nothing. Jake felt his heart speed up. This might be his only chance? 25 credits to start the bidding? Jake raised his hand. 25. Thank you, sir. Do I hear 50? Silence filled the room. Jake held his breath. Going once at 25 credits, going twice. The auctioneer's hammer paused in the air. Sold to bidder 47 for 25. Credits. Jake could hardly believe it. He had just bought a starship for less than the cost of a good meal. As he walked to the payment desk, other bidders gave him strange looks. Some laughed quietly, probably thinking he was crazy. Maybe he was, but crazy had kept him alive in the salvage business. After paying and signing papers, Jake got the access codes and docking bay location. The ship sat alone in Bay 94, looking even stranger up close. Its surface was smooth like polished stone, but when he touched it, the material felt warm and slightly soft. The airlock opened with his new codes and Jake stepped inside. The first thing he noticed was the smell. Not the usual mix of metal, fuel, and old air that filled most ships. This smelled like growing things, like a garden after rain. Emergency. Lighting cast red shadows on walls that curved like the inside of a shell. Nothing looked familiar. Jake pulled out his scanner and started mapping the ship. The corridors twisted in ways that hurt his head to follow, but eventually led to what seemed like a main room. Strange panels covered the walls, dark and smooth as black glass. When he touched one, colored lights flickered under the surface. For a moment before going dark again. What kind of ship are you? He whispered to himself. He found what might be crew quarters, though the sleeping areas were shaped wrong for humans. The bridge, if that's what it was, had no chairs or controls he could understand. Everything felt organic, like being inside. A living creature instead of a machine. After 3 hours of exploring, Jake was ready to give up. Maybe the other bidders were right to avoid this thing. He could probably sell some of the strange materials, but without working systems. The ship was just expensive junk. Then he found the sealed door. It was hidden behind what looked like part of the wall, only visible when his scanner picked up empty space beyond. Jake pressed his hands against the smooth surface, looking for any kind of opening mechanism. Nothing happened at first, but then the wall began to change. Lines of soft light appeared, forming patterns that reminded him of circuit boards or maybe veins in a leaf. The door slid open with a sound like a deep breath. Inside was a room unlike anything Jake had ever seen. Crystalline formations grew from floor to ceiling, glowing with their own inner light. In the center stood a tall pod made of clear material, filled with shimmering liquid that moved like it was alive. and floating inside the liquid was a woman, Jake's. First thought was that she was dead, some kind of preserved specimen or ancient artifact. But as he got closer, he could see her chest rising and falling slowly. She was breathing or something like it. Her skin had a faint glow, pale but somehow luminous. Her hair moved in the liquid like she was underwater, long and silver-white. She looked almost human, but Jake could see differences. Her ears were pointed, and thin lines of metal traced patterns along her temples and down her neck. She was beautiful in a way that made Jake's chest tight. Even sleeping in her strange tank, she looked royal, important, like someone who commanded. Respect. Her clothes seemed to be made of the same material as the ship, flowing around her body like liquid metal. Jake reached out to touch the pod. And suddenly everything changed. Lights blazed throughout the ship. Panels that had been dark for who knows how long came alive with swirling colors and patterns. Jake felt the deck vibrate under his feet as systems he did not understand began to hum with power. The woman's eyes opened. They were deep blue, like looking into clear ocean water, and they focused on Jake with sharp intelligence. For a long moment they stared at each other through the clear walls of her pod. Then her lips moved, forming words Jake could not hear through the liquid. Alarms began sounding throughout the ship. The lights flashed red, and Jake heard the airlock sealing itself. He was trapped. The woman in the pod was trying to sit up, her hands pressed against the clear walls. The liquid around her began to drain away, and Jake realized he was about to meet the most expensive surprise of his life. He had bought what he thought was a dead ship at auction. Instead, he had awakened something that had been sleeping among the stars, waiting for someone foolish enough to disturb her rest. The liquid drained from the pod with a soft gurgling sound, leaving the woman coughing and gasping as she breathed real air for the first time in centuries. Jake stepped back, unsure if he should help or run. The sealed airlock meant running was not an option anyway. She was taller than Jake had expected. Nearly 6 feet, and moved with grace even as she struggled to stand. Water dripped from her silver hair and strange clothes, but her eyes never left Jake's face. She spoke again, her voice musical but speaking words he did not understand. "I'm sorry," Jake said, holding up his hands to show he meant no harm. "I don't know what you're saying." The woman tilted her head, studying him like he was some interesting puzzle. She reached up and touched the metal lines along her temple. They began to glow softly, and her eyes went wide for a moment. When she spoke again, Jake could almost understand her words, though they sounded strange. "You are not of the Dominion," she said slowly, as if learning to use her mouth differently. "What manner of being are you?" "I'm human," Jake replied. "My name is Jake Morrison. I bought this ship at an auction. I didn't know anyone was inside it." Her eyebrows rose in surprise. "Human? I do not know this word. And you purchased the Whisper of Stars? How is this possible?" "The what of what?" Jake asked. "Look, lady, I paid 25 credits for what I thought was junk. If you own this thing, we need to sort this out." The woman stepped carefully out of her pod, still unsteady on her feet. Jake noticed that the metal tracery on her skin extended down her arms and probably her whole body, forming delicate patterns under her pale skin. She was definitely not human, but close enough to be unsettling. 25 credits, she repeated, sounding amazed. The most advanced bioship ever grown sold for 25 credits. She began to laugh, a sound like silver bells that made Jake's stomach flutter in a way he did not expect. "Bioship?" he asked. "You mean this thing is alive?" "Of course it is alive. The Whisper of Stars was grown in the sacred pools of Valdris, blessed by our greatest bioengineers. It has been my companion since childhood." Her face grew sad. "Though I fear both my world and my childhood are long past." Jake wanted to ask more questions, but the ship's alarms were still sounding. Red lights flashed in patterns that seemed almost like a heartbeat. "Is something wrong?" "These alarms started when you woke up." The woman pressed her hand against the nearest wall, and the alarm stopped. The red lights changed to soft blue, and Jake heard what sounded like a contented sigh from the ship itself. "The Whisper was afraid," she explained. When I entered the deep sleep, I programmed it to hide until someone worthy could serve as my guardian. It has been waiting for 300 years. 300 years? Jake's voice cracked. You've been asleep for 3 centuries? More or less. I am Lyra of House Valdris, heir to the ethereal dominion. She looked at Jake with those deep blue eyes. And you, Jake Morrison the human, are apparently my chosen guardian. I didn't choose anything, Jake protested. I just wanted a ship that could fly. The Whisper chose you, Lyra said firmly. Bioships do not respond to unworthy beings. When you touched the door controls, it read your essence and found you acceptable. We are now bonded, Jake felt a chill. What does that mean exactly? Before Lyra could answer, new alarms began sounding. These were different, harsher, and came with flashing orange lights. Lyra's face went pale. Consortium hunters, she whispered. They have found us. What's the consortium? Jake asked, but Lyra was already moving, placing her hands on wall panels that lit up at her touch. The ones who destroyed my world and scattered my people. They have been hunting me across the galaxy. The ship around them began to hum with power. Can you fight, Jake Morrison? I'm a salvage operator, not a soldier. You are about to become both. Lyra's fingers danced across the glowing panels. The Whisper's weapons are organic, grown rather than built. They require a biological interface to function properly. Through what Jake now realized was a viewscreen, he saw 3 dark ships approaching fast. They looked mean and built for war, with weapon ports already glowing red. How do I interface with organic weapons? Jake asked, feeling panic rise in his throat. Touch the wall and think about protecting us. Lyra was concentrating on her own panel, sweat beading on her forehead. The ship will guide you. Jake put his palms against the smooth wall surface. It felt warm, almost like skin, and he could swear he felt a pulse underneath. He thought about the approaching ships and how much he wanted them to go away. The wall surface rippled under his hands. Suddenly, Jake could feel the space around their ship. He sensed the 3 hunters closing in, their weapons charging, their pilots eager for the kill. But he could also feel something else, like roots or tentacles extending from the whisper of stars. When he thought about striking back, those extensions moved. Fire, Lyra said. Jake thought about hitting the nearest enemy ship, and something like lightning leaped from the whisper. It was not energy or projectiles, but something alive that wrapped around the hunter ship and squeezed. The enemy vessel's hull buckled and cracked. Good, Lyra said, breathing hard. 2 more. The remaining hunters split up, trying to attack from different angles. Jake could feel their weapons hitting the Whisper's hull, but the bio-ship's living armor absorbed most of the damage. He reached out with those strange tentacle things again, but the enemy pilots were ready this time. They are learning our pattern, Lyra warned. We need to do something unexpected, Jake grinned despite the danger. I'm good at unexpected. Instead of reaching for the enemy ships, he thought about the asteroid field they were passing through. The Whisper's biotendrils grabbed several large rocks and flung them at the hunters like a cosmic snowball fight. One enemy ship dodged right into Jake's trap. He had thrown rocks where the ship would be, not where it was. The hunter craft slammed into an asteroid and exploded in a brief flare of light. The last enemy ship turned and ran. Impressive, Lyra said, looking at Jake with new respect. Unconventional tactics. My people would never think to use debris as weapons. Your people probably never work salvage, Jake replied. When you spend your life around junk, you learn that everything can be useful. The ship's systems were calming down, returning to the soft blue glow that seemed to mean safety. Jake realized he was still touching the wall and could feel the Whisper's contentment like a cat purring. So what happens now? He asked. Lyra moved closer to him, studying his face intently. Now we must flee before more hunters arrive. And I must decide if a human guardian can truly help me reclaim what was lost. What was lost? Everything, she said quietly. My world, my people, my birthright. The consortium scattered the survivors and claimed our territory. I am the last of the royal bloodline, and without a proper guardian, I cannot challenge their rule. Jake looked around at the strange, living ship that had somehow chosen him. And you think I'm this proper guardian? The Whisper thinks so, and bioships are rarely wrong about such things. Lyra smiled, and Jake felt that flutter in his stomach again. Besides, you fight well for someone who claims to be peaceful. I said I wasn't a soldier, not that I was peaceful. Jake grinned back at her. Salvage work teaches you to defend what's yours, then we understand each other. Lyra placed her hand over his on the wall, and Jake felt the ship respond to both of them together. I warn you, Jake Morrison the human. Being my guardian will not be easy. The Consortium has many enemies, and they will stop at nothing to prevent my return. Jake thought about his old life, scraping by on salvage work, always one broken deal away from poverty. Then he looked at Lyra, beautiful and dangerous, and definitely the most interesting thing that had ever happened to him. Lady, 3 hours ago I was broke and shipless. Now I've got a living spacecraft and apparently some kind of space princess. My life wasn't exactly easy before. He squeezed her hand gently. At least now it's going to be interesting. 3 weeks after their first battle, Jake was learning that living with an alien princess was more complicated than fighting space pirates. Lyra insisted on teaching him proper etiquette for dealing with other species, while Jake tried to explain why humans did not bow to everyone they met. The hive merchants will expect formal greeting protocols, Lyra said as they approached Nexus Station. You must acknowledge their queen mothers first, then the trade speakers, then the worker castes. Or I could just say hello and ask what they're selling, Jake replied, guiding the Whisper of Stars toward the massive trading hub. Works fine with humans. Lyra made a sound that Jake had learned meant she thought humans were impossibly crude. The hive merchants have traded with civilized species for thousands of years. They expect respect for their customs. And if their customs are stupid? Then you smile and follow them anyway, because we need their help. The Whisper of Stars docked at Nexus Station with barely a vibration. Jake was getting better at working with the bioship systems, learning to think his commands rather than punch buttons. The ship seemed to enjoy the partnership, responding to his intentions almost before he formed them clearly. Nexus Station was a maze of corridors and chambers carved into a massive asteroid. Dozens of alien species came here to trade everything, from rare metals to exotic foods. Jake had visited twice before in his salvage days, but never with a royal escort. The hive merchant sector smelled like honey and machine oil. The insectoid traders moved in precise patterns, their 6 legs clicking on metal floors while their upper arms manipulated complex tools. They were each about 4 feet tall, with glossy black shells and compound eyes that missed nothing. Jake. And Lyra approached the central trading chamber, where a larger hive merchant sat on a raised platform. This would be a queen mother, Jake guessed, since Lyra immediately began an elaborate bowing routine. Honored Queen Mother, Lyra said in the formal tone she used for diplomacy. We seek trade rights and safe passage through your territory. The Queen Mother's compound eyes fixed on Lyra, then shifted to Jake. She made a series of clicking sounds that Jake's translator rendered as, the small one shows proper respect, but the large one stands like a worker who forgets his place. Jake felt Lyra tense beside him. In the weeks they had traveled together, he had learned to read her moods. Right now, she was embarrassed and worried that his manners would ruin their negotiation. Actually, Jake said, stepping forward, I'm standing like someone who has something you want. The Queen Mother's clicking stopped. Around the chamber, worker merchants froze in their tasks. Lyra looked like she wanted to disappear. Explain. The Queen Mother commanded. Jake pulled out a small device from his pocket, something he had salvaged months ago and never found a buyer for. This is a human quantum resonator. We use them to find ore deposits in asteroids. The Queen Mother leaned forward, her antenna twitching with interest. Show me. Jake activated the device and swept it around the chamber. It began beeping rapidly when he pointed it toward one wall. There's a deposit of rare earth metals behind that wall, about 30 meters in. The Queen Mother made rapid clicking sounds to her workers. 2 of them scurried away and returned with drilling equipment. Within minutes, they had confirmed Jake's Reading, behind the wall, was indeed a rich vein of metals the hive merchants had missed in their original surveys. "Impressive," the Queen Mother said. "What do you want for this technology?" "Safe passage for my ship and my partner here. Plus information about consortium movements in this sector." "Done." The Queen Mother's manner changed completely, becoming almost friendly. "Any species that can find wealth in empty stone is worth knowing." As they left the hive merchant sector with their new trading agreements, Lyra shook her head at Jake. "That was either brilliant or incredibly lucky." "Or both," Jake admitted. "I've been carrying that scanner for months, but I never thought to use it as a negotiation tool until just now. Your people have an unusual approach to diplomacy. We call it practical." Jake grinned. "Though I probably should have bowed a little." She seemed to like the respect thing. Their next stop was Haven Colony, a human settlement on the edge of civilized space. Jake needed supplies and parts for the Whisper's more conventional systems, and he wanted Lyra to meet other humans before she decided whether his entire species was worth knowing. Haven Colony was built into the caverns of a small moon, its corridors lined with hydroponic gardens and workshops. The air smelled like growing plants and welding metal. Jake felt more relaxed here than he had since leaving Station 7. "It's smaller than I expected," Lyra said as they walked through the main plaza. "Your species builds on such a modest scale." "We're practical people," Jake replied. "Why build bigger than you need?" They were browsing a parts dealer when the alarms started. Red lights flashed throughout the colony, and Jake heard the distinctive whine of ships dropping out of hyperspace nearby. Consortium hunters had found them again. "How many?" Jake asked the parts dealer, an older woman named Betty who had known him for years. "3 ships, maybe 4, Betty said, checking her instruments. "They're demanding we hand over the fugitives." "That would be us," Lyra said quietly. "Like hell," Betty snorted. "Jake's good people, and Haven Colony doesn't bow to consortium bullies." She activated the colony's comm system. "All defenders to stations. We've got unwelcome visitors." Jake watched in amazement as the peaceful trading colony transformed into a fortress. Hidden weapon ports opened in the asteroid's surface. Ships that looked like simple cargo haulers revealed themselves as armed escorts. Within minutes, Haven Colony had become a very dangerous place for anyone looking for trouble. "Your people fight well," Lyra observed as the battle unfolded on tracking screens. The consortium hunters had expected to intimidate a small human settlement. Instead, they found themselves outnumbered and outgunned. "We don't like being pushed around," Jake said. "And we really don't like outsiders threatening our friends." The consortium ships withdrew after losing one vessel and suffering damage to the others. As the colony's defenses powered down, Jake felt a warm pride in his species. Humans might not have the most advanced technology or the oldest civilization, but they stood by their own. "I begin to understand why the Whisper chose you," Lyra said. As they returned to their ship, "Your people have qualities that cannot be measured by technology or tradition." "Such as?" "Loyalty, adaptability, the willingness to fight for what matters." She looked at Jake with those deep blue eyes. "These are rare traits in the galaxy." Back aboard the Whisper of Stars, Jake found himself thinking about the battle while Lyra worked at the bioship's navigation systems. The humans had won through teamwork and clever tactics, not superior firepower. They had treated him and Lyra as family worth protecting, even though they barely knew her. "Lyra," he said finally, "what happened to your world exactly?" Her hands stopped moving over the controls. "The consortium came with overwhelming force and offers of partnership. When we refused to share our biotechnology, they declared us a threat to galactic stability. The war lasted 3 years. What ended it? They poisoned our growth pools. Without them, we could not create new bioships or maintain our existing ones. My father sent me into deep sleep aboard the last functional vessel, hoping someone worthy would find me and help rebuild." Her voice grew soft. "I've been alone for 300 years, Jake, until now." Jake moved closer to her, drawn by the sadness in her voice. "You're not alone anymore." "No," she agreed, turning to face him. "I am not." The space between them seemed to shrink. Jake found himself looking into her eyes, seeing not just an alien princess, but a woman who had lost everything and still found the strength to hope. When she stepped closer, he did not step back. "Jake," she said quietly, "there are things you should understand about my people. The biomechanical integration, the royal bloodlines, the political implications of what we are becoming." "What are we becoming?" Instead of answering with words, she took his hand and placed it on the ship's wall beside her own. Jake felt the whisper's contentment, but also something new. A connection between himself and Lyra, mediated by the living ship but growing stronger on its own. "Partners," she said finally, "in every sense that matters." Jake squeezed her hand. "Gently, I can live with that." Around them, the whisper of stars hummed with satisfaction, carrying its two bonded passengers toward whatever adventures waited among the stars. 2 months after Haven Colony, Jake learned that being hunted across the galaxy was exhausting work. He and Lyra had visited 12 different systems, gathering allies and information while staying ahead of consortium forces. The Whisper of Stars had become their mobile base, its biosystems adapting to their needs as they traveled. "The Valdris survivors are scattered across 40 systems, Lyra said, studying data they had collected. "Most have given up hope of restoration. They live quiet lives, hiding their heritage. Can you blame them?" Jake asked, working on repairs to one of the ship's conventional sensors. "They've been running for 3 centuries. No, but I need them if we are to challenge the consortium. A single bioship, even with a human guardian, cannot fight an empire." Jake set down his tools and looked at her. In the past weeks, he had watched Lyra grow from a confused woman awakening from centuries of sleep into a determined leader planning revolution. The change was impressive and slightly scary. "What exactly are you planning?" he asked. "To take back what was stolen from my people. To restore the ethereal dominion and punish those who destroyed our world." Her biomechanical implants flickered with soft light as she spoke. "And to show the galaxy that humans and ethereals together are stronger than either could be alone." The plan she outlined over the next hour was ambitious beyond anything Jake had imagined. They would gather the scattered survivors, convince human colonies to provide support, and build a coalition strong enough to challenge consortium rule in this sector. It would take years and cost thousands of lives. "You realize I'm just a salvage operator," Jake said when she finished. "I fix broken things and sell scrap metal. I'm not qualified to lead a revolution." "The Whisper of Stars disagrees," Lyra replied, placing her hand on the ship's wall. "Bioships do not choose leaders lightly. And I have watched you work, Jake. Morrison, you see solutions where others see only problems." Their conversation was interrupted by an incoming transmission. Jake activated the CUM system, and the face of Captain Harris from Haven Colony appeared on screen. "Jake, we've got trouble," Harris said without preamble. "Consortium fleet just hit New Perth Colony. 3 bioships were seen helping with the evacuation." Jake felt his blood go cold. "Ethereal survivors? Has to be. The consortium is claiming the colony was harboring fugitives. They're demanding all human settlements submit to inspection for quote-unquote alien infiltrators." Lyra leaned into the pickup. "Captain Harris, this is Lyra of House Valdris. How many survivors made it out of New Perth?" "About half the population, Princess. The bioships saved everyone they could before the consortium destroyers arrived." Harris's expression grew grim. "But this changes things. The consortium is treating human colonies as enemy territory now." After the transmission ended, Jake and Lyra sat in silence for several minutes. The conflict they had been trying to avoid was spreading, drawing innocent humans into a war that had started 3 centuries ago. "We have to move faster," Lyra said finally. "The consortium will not stop with New Perth. They will attack every human settlement that might shelter ethereal refugees. Then we need to be ready to fight back." Jake spent the next week contacting every salvage operator, trader, and colony leader he had ever met. His reputation as an honest dealer opened doors that diplomatic approaches might not have managed. When he explained the situation, most humans were angry enough to listen. The meeting took place at Crossroads Station. A neutral trading post in the DMZ between human and consortium space. Jake had never seen so many different human factions in one place. Colony representatives sat next to ship captains, traders mixed with military officers, and everyone argued about what to do next. "The consortium has superior numbers and technology," said Commander Walsh from the Colonial Defense Force. "A direct confrontation would be suicide. So we just let them pick off our colonies one by one?" demanded Captain Torres from the Free Traders Association. "That's also suicide, just slower." Jake stood up and the room gradually quieted. "I've got something to show you all," he said. Activating the HOLO-projector, the image that appeared was a detailed scan of a consortium destroyer, taken during their escape from New Perth, but instead of showing the ship's weapons and armor, Jake had highlighted its power systems and structural weak points. "This is what I do for a living," Jake explained. "I look at broken ships and figure out how to fix them. But the same skills work in reverse." He pointed to several areas on the scan. "These are the weak points. Hit them right, and even a small ship can cripple a destroyer." "You're talking about guerrilla tactics," Commander Walsh said. "Hit and run attacks." "I'm talking about fighting." "Smart instead of fighting fair," Jake replied. "The consortium expects us to line up our ships and trade shots like civilized people. They're not ready for salvage operators who know how to make everything into a weapon." Captain Torres grinned. "I like this plan. What do you need from us?" "Ships, crews, and the willingness to do whatever it takes to protect human space." Jake looked around the room. "And trust in our ethereal allies? Princess Lyra and her people have biotechnology that could give us the edge we need." "You're asking us to bet our lives on alien magic?" said a colony representative. "I'm asking you to bet your lives on the best partnership humanity has ever had," Jake replied. "I've seen what we can accomplish together." The debate continued for hours, but eventually a consensus emerged. The humans would provide ships and personnel, while the ethereals contributed their biotechnology and knowledge of consortium weaknesses. Jake found himself elected as overall coordinator, a job he definitely had not wanted but could not refuse. 3 weeks later, Jake stood on the bridge of the Whisper of Stars, watching the largest human fleet ever assembled prepare for battle. 60 ships of every size and type floated in formation, from massive cargo haulers converted into carriers to sleek fighter craft built for speed and stealth. Mixed among them were 12 ethereal bioships, their organic curves standing out among the angular human vessels. Each bioship carried refugees from the destroyed colonies, ethereal survivors who had finally found hope worth fighting for. "The consortium fleet is approaching," reported Lieutenant Chun from the sensor station. They had installed 24 vessels, including 6 heavy destroyers. "They still outnumber us," Lyra observed, her hands dancing over the bioship's control surfaces. "Numbers aren't everything," Jake replied, opening the fleet communication channel. "All ships. This is Morrison. Remember the plan. We're not here to slug it out. We hit hard, we hit smart, and we get out alive." The battle that followed would be talked about in spacer bars for decades. The human ships attacked in small groups, using their knowledge of salvage and repair to target the enemy's weak points. Meanwhile, the bioships used their living weapons to disable rather than destroy. Capturing enemy personnel for interrogation, Jake coordinated the battle from the Whisper of Stars, using the bioship's enhanced sensors to stay ahead of enemy movements. When a group of destroyers tried to outflank the human formation, he was ready with a cluster of converted mining ships that turned their industrial lasers into devastating weapons. "Consortium flagship is breaking off," reported Chun. "They're retreating. Let them go," Jake ordered. "We've made our point." As the enemy fleet withdrew, Jake looked around at his mixed force of humans and ethereals. They had taken damage, lost some ships, but they had won. More importantly, they had proven that cooperation between species could overcome superior numbers. "Well fought," Lyra said, moving close to him. "Your tactics worked perfectly." "Our tactics?" Jake corrected. "I couldn't have done this without your people's bioships. And we could not have done it without human determination and ingenuity." She smiled. I think this partnership will change the galaxy. Jake looked out at the stars, thinking about the war they had just escalated and the peace they hoped to build. Yeah, he said finally. I think you're right. In the distance, the consortium fleet continued its retreat, carrying news of humanity's new alliance back to their masters. The war was far from over, but for the first time in centuries, the ethereal dominion had hope of restoration, and at the center of it all, a former salvage operator and an alien princess had found something worth fighting for together. 6 months after their first major victory, Jake Morrison stood in the command center of Freedom Station, watching intelligence reports flow in from across the sector. The converted asteroid base had become the heart of the growing alliance between humans and ethereals, buzzing with activity as ships came and went on missions throughout known space. The consortium is massing their main fleet at Nexus Prime, reported Captain Torres, now serving as Jake's intelligence chief. Our spies count over 200 vessels, including their new dreadnoughts. Jake studied the tactical display, feeling the weight of command on his shoulders. In the past months, he had gone from salvage operator to admiral of the largest rebel fleet in galactic history. The responsibility still felt strange, but he had learned to trust his instincts and the advice of his allies. How long before they move? He asked. 3 weeks, maybe 4. They're waiting for reinforcements from the core worlds. Lyra entered the command center, her biomechanical implants glowing softly as she processed data from the ethereal intelligence network. She had changed too, growing from a confused princess into a war leader who commanded respect from both species. The scattered ethereal families are ready, she announced. 43 bioships will join the final battle, carrying the last survivors of my people. Jake nodded, trying not to think about how desperate their situation really was. Even with all their allies, they were still outnumbered 3-1. The consortium had spent centuries building their military machine, while the alliance had only months to prepare. What about the new weapon? He asked. Lyra's expression grew troubled. The bioengineers are still working on it. Combining human technology with ethereal biosystems is more complex than we hoped. For weeks, the Alliance's best minds had been working on a secret project that might give them the edge they needed. By merging human quantum technology with ethereal biomechanics, they hoped to create something neither species could achieve alone, but time was running out. I want to see it, Jake decided. They took a shuttle to the research facility hidden in the asteroid's core, where Dr. Kim from Haven Colony worked alongside ethereal bioengineers in chambers that smelled like growing things and ozone. The project they were building defied easy description, part machine and part living organism. We call it the Unity Matrix, Dr. Kim explained, gesturing toward the chamber where the device pulsed with its own inner light. It's designed to link human neural patterns with ethereal biosystems on a massive scale. What does that mean in practical terms? Jake asked. It means you could coordinate an entire fleet as if it were a single organism, said Naris, the lead ethereal engineer. Every ship moving in perfect harmony, every weapon firing at the optimal moment. Jake felt a chill. And the cost? Dr. Kim and Naris exchanged glances. The neural strain would be enormous, Dr. Kim admitted. Whoever interfaces with the Matrix would be linking their mind to hundreds of ships and thousands of crew members simultaneously. It might be survivable, Naris added quickly. The biosystems are designed to support the interface, but we cannot be certain. Jake studied the pulsing device, thinking about the battle to come and the lives depending on his decisions. How long to complete it? 2 weeks if we work around the clock. Do it. As they returned to the command center, Lyra was quiet, her face troubled. Finally, she spoke. You're planning to use the Matrix yourself. Someone has to. Not necessarily you. She stopped walking and faced him. Jake, I have trained my entire life to interface with biosystems. My neural patterns are already adapted for the connection. And risk the last heir to the ethereal dominion? No way. The dominion means nothing if we lose this battle. Her blue eyes blazed with determination. Besides, you have other responsibilities. Now Jake raised an eyebrow. Such as? Instead of answering, Lyra took his hand and placed it on her stomach. For a moment, Jake felt nothing unusual. Then the biomechanical implants in her skin began to glow, and he sensed something new. A tiny spark of life, part human and part ethereal, growing inside her. "How is that possible?" he whispered. "Biosystems. Adapt," she said softly. "When we bonded through the whisper of stars, our genetic patterns began to merge. The child will carry traits from both our species." Jake felt his world shift. In the middle of planning the most important battle in galactic history, he was going to be a father. The irony was not lost on him. "All the more reason for me to use the Matrix," he said finally. "I want our kid to grow up free. Our child will need both parents alive to raise it properly." They argued about it for days while the Alliance fleet gathered and the Unity Matrix neared completion. Jake insisted that his experience coordinating the previous battles made him the logical choice. Lyra countered that her biomechanical integration gave her better compatibility with the system. The debate ended when the consortium fleet appeared 3 days early, dropping out of hyperspace at the edge of the system like an approaching storm. 230 vessels, including the massive flagship Dominator, advanced in perfect formation toward Freedom Station. "All ships to battle stations," Jake ordered, settling the argument by default. "Lyra, get to the Matrix chamber, Dr. Kim, is the system ready? As ready as we can make it in the time we had?" Jake made his way to the Unity Matrix, followed by Lyra and half the command staff. The device had grown in the past weeks, its biomechanical components spreading across the chamber walls like a vast nervous system. At the center sat a chair that looked more grown than built, surrounded by tendrils that would link directly to the user's neural implants. "The interface will be intense," Dr. Kim warned. "You'll feel every ship in the fleet, every crew member, every weapon system. Try to stay focused on the overall battle plan." Jake settled into the chair, feeling the biomechanical tendrils attached to the neural ports Lyra had helped him install weeks ago. "If this kills me, make sure the kid knows. I tried to give them a better galaxy." "Tell them yourself when this is over," Lyra said, leaning down to kiss him. "I love you, Jake Morrison." "I love you too, Princess." The activation sequence began, and suddenly Jake's consciousness exploded outward. He could feel every ship in the Alliance fleet, from the mighty human carriers to the smallest ethereal scouts. Nearly 300 vessels and 15,000 crew members, all connected through his mind and the Unity Matrix. The sensation was overwhelming at first, like trying to think with 1,000 different brains simultaneously. But gradually, Jake learned to filter the information, focusing on movement patterns and tactical coordination rather than individual thoughts. The consortium fleet approached in their traditional formation, expecting another conventional battle. Instead, they faced something unprecedented. The Alliance fleet moved like a single organism, ships weaving between enemy formations with impossible precision, while weapons fired in perfectly coordinated volleys. Jake felt the battle through hundreds of perspectives at once. He was the fighter pilot diving through anti-aircraft fire, the gunner targeting enemy weak points, the engineer rerouting power to damaged systems. Every decision flowed through the Unity Matrix and out to the fleet in real time. The consortium forces, despite their superior numbers, began to falter. Their rigid command structure could not adapt fast enough to counter the Alliance's fluid tactics. When Jake ordered a feint toward their left flank, every ship in the fleet responded instantly, creating gaps in the enemy formation that other units immediately exploited. "Consortium flagship is trying to withdraw," someone reported, the voice reaching Jake through the Matrix connection. Not today, Jake thought, and the entire fleet shifted focus to the Dominator. What followed was less a battle than a demonstration of what unified purpose could accomplish. The Alliance ships swarmed the massive flagship like antibodies attacking. An infection, their bioweapons and conventional armaments working in perfect harmony. Within an hour, the pride of the consortium fleet was drifting powerless, its crew surrendering rather than face destruction. The remaining enemy vessels fled, carrying news of their defeat back to the core worlds. As the Unity Matrix powered down, Jake felt his consciousness contract back to normal human limits. The sudden isolation was almost painful after sharing thoughts with thousands of others. "Status report," he managed to say, though his voice sounded strange to his own ears. "Complete victory," Lyra replied, helping him out of the interface chair. "Enemy fleet destroyed or scattered, minimal casualties on our side. The consortium? In full retreat across the sector. Our combined fleet is already moving to liberate the occupied colonies." Jake nodded, feeling exhaustion wash over him. The neural strain of the Matrix interface had been enormous, but they had won. After centuries of oppression, the ethereal dominion was free to rebuild, and humanity had proven itself as a major galactic power. 2 years later, Jake stood on the observation deck of the new Valdris orbital station, watching construction crews put the finishing touches on the latest bioship to emerge from the restored growth pools. In his arms, his daughter gurgled and reached toward the stars, her eyes the same deep blue as her mother's but with flecks of brown that marked her human heritage. "She's going to be beautiful," Lyra said, joining them at the viewport.